I thought, what is the risk here? Really, what is the risk? That I go off and do this for 2-3 years and it doesn't work. I go back into my corporate career. Is my CV, my experience, my persona, my confidence gonna be bigger if I do this for 3 years and learn all that, go through the grit and etc., and maybe it doesn't work, or if I stay in my corporate career? And when I look at that way, I was like, well, there's no comparison. I'll learn much more if I do this, and then worst case scenario, I go back with a much broader toolkit.
I was having a look through a bit of your background to kind of get a color of the journey you've been on that is out there for people to see already. So a great way of seeing that is through people's social media, and of course professionally through LinkedIn.
Yep.
So from the outside looking in, an exceptional career in the sense of you've touched on consultancy, digital media, innovation, work through to, global strategy and global chief of business strategy, and work with global clients. Then you decided not too long ago to co-found your own company in the space of global climate and global climate success. What I want to understand is, especially these areas, given what year we're in now and how long ago you started it, you seem to find a passion or interest in this before it became the buzzwords and, the target focus areas that it is today. I love to understand where these influences come from, and I'd love to know what is the earliest context that you can provide, so that can stem back a generation or, even further back, of the story that might start to explain where this desire before it becomes a trend has come from.
Wow, that's a question. So thank you for asking it, because it's always good to take time to reflect. Sometimes we all run 1,000 miles per hour, so it's good sometimes to stop for a sec, relax, look back, and go a bit deeper into things. So sustainability and climate change specifically has been something that always moved me. Somehow it created emotions. And I had my first attempt to do something meaningful in this space in the late 2000s. So I remember I went to Copenhagen in 2009 when there was the COP19 at the time. The COP is these annual meetings that corporate leaders, politicians all come together and talk about climate. And I remember going there trying to make my voice heard, because I thought that was a bit of the last window of time we had to make changes in time before we had to move from aversion or avoidance of climate change into mitigation, which is, I think, where we are today. And I flew there and I teamed up with a couple of people from London. Actually, I was based in Milan at the time. We'll tell more about the story later. And it was the early days of Twitter. And it was their idea mainly. I was like the messenger in a way. They had this great idea of asking people on Twitter if they could send a message to the leaders of the world on what we would all be missing if climate disaster was going to happen. And they created this lovely booklet also with the illustrations meant for people in the decision-making room. And I remember I had the chance to get inside the Bella Center. This was the conference center where all these guys were meeting up. You had the likes of Obama, etc., etc. And I had a media pass that I got via work in some way, and started to give these booklets around. And I remember giving it to Schwarzenegger as well.
Wow.
Which was quite fun. But it was a bit too early probably versus where we are today. So in some shape or form, my career took different paths. As you were alluding to, I grew through a corporate called Dentsu, which is like a large multinational. I was chief of business strategy when I left. This like a 50,000 people business. But I always felt I wanted to focus my time career on this specific topic issue, which I did a bit internally at the company. And as I was going through that journey of trying to get that business to pivot and change for the climate challenge, I just realized there must be a better way to do this via technology for large corporates, and that's 51 to Carbon Zero. So it's a platform that helps companies really understand their footprint and then find solutions to reduce that footprint and improve their positive impact.
You said that climate change and sustainability was always, an interest for you.
Yep.
Can you see where maybe in, the journey that your family have been through, or the way that you were raised and the places you were raised, where there might have been either strong influences or any pivotal moments that drew this interest out?
So just to give a bit of a background about myself to you and the audience. So I'm half British, half Italian. So I was born here, English dad, Italian mom. Then when I was 3 or 4, my parents split up and my mom went back to Italy and I went with her. And for a number of years, I've been a bit separate from my English-British heritage. So I was in sporadic contact with my dad up until I was 18, essentially, and I had in my mind that I wanted to find the other part of my heritage, if you will. So I grew up in Milan as an AC Milan supporter, as we were saying before. And I wanted to discover a little bit more about the other part of my DNA, if you will. So I've picked up the phone and or wrote a letter, I can't remember, told my dad I would like to come and visit and rebuild a bit of that relationship. So how does this relate to climate change and where I'm today? Well, geographically, where I'm today, of course, there's the link with the family and the London heritage, if you will. I think what I've learned from that experience and seeing what the experience of my parents, and I'll tell a bit about that in a second, is that you can turn things around. That nothing is impossible. Nothing. Might take a bit longer, but it's not impossible. So for my mom, for example, to get a divorce, move back to Italy, she was in her early 30s, in the 80s, moving back to live with my grandmother and myself for a number of years. So we started with a lot of nothing, if you will. And then she made her way in journalism, etc., etc. She was a working woman in the 80s. For me, that was like an inspiration. On the other hand, my dad here, he's got a different story. He came from a family history of people moving and finding new opportunities in new countries. His family came to England in the late 19th century. Those type of immigrants, when they come to the Liverpool harbor, they just pick a name, looking at the shops. Say, okay, we'll be called Davis. A reputable name. They've got the name on the shop window. His story was a story again of challenge and finding new ways. And himself coming from. I've heard some of your podcasts. Some of your guests come from a similar background where you got immigrants, parents, and then they want their children to have a very steady career. He went through that and he kind of rejected that and went on a different path and still was able to have a great life. And that was an inspiration to me as well. Again, turning things around, etc., etc. So in a way, when I think of climate and climate challenge, I love the challenge itself. Something that looks like impossible. It's a global issue. So many moving parts. We can do it.
And you talk about the risk-taking element of both sides of the family. Those are where I see, good similarities in the influences that it gave to you. But in terms of, did you notice any specific differences either in the values or the cultures, given that they were from, completely different geographies, and what impact that had on your, sense of identity or what you identified as, the character traits that really defined who you were in your early years?
So I think having this, so growing up in Milan with a English name, people always look at you a little bit differently to begin with. Just, when you introduce yourself, say, hello, I'm Richard. Like, is that a nickname or what? They usually say after 10 minutes of speaking with me, you speak really good Italian for an American. I don't know why they say an American for some reason. But so you always have the thing about identity that is kind of reminded to you of what is your identity in a way. And on the flip side here, very like British name and a very non-British accent, which again, people are like, maybe we mixed you up with someone else. I mean, if you're in a meeting room, you are Paolo probably, you're not Richard or whatever. To your question, I think identity is, I always had like this, I had to embrace my identity and try to define it. And it's been like a journey of acceptance in a way, because there are stages in life when you want to fit in. And it's probably is a never-ending piece, I think, to say that, I finally got to realization that my identity is myself, not Italian, not English, not whatever, it's just me. However, the advantage of having this mixed background is that you accept and you personally are intrigued by whatever is different. And you tend to fit in and blend in. Fit in is the wrong word. You tend to, because you accept, you're open, you tend to be able to mix with people of different cultures and backgrounds, which I think if you look at my friends, etc., I get on very well with people from very different walks of life.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there, because again, looking back at a lot of the guests that I've had on and picking out what in their journey, it's something that I've said in one of the previous episodes, it's usually not something exceptional that's happened in their previous history, like a completely a life altering moment that's taken them on a path of pursuing something with purpose, or something like I describe as unconventional. But usually it's the perspective they've taken on a particular set of circumstances they were given or they have gone through that made them think a bit further about what they wanted to do. A great quote which kind of links this point together: nothing can be truly resilient when everything goes right. And so going back to what you were saying about, the early years that you remember yourself going through, you had to develop that adaptability and resilience because it wasn't the normal, or what, in this case, way could be considered right way of being able to immerse in the society or community around you, because you appeared different in terms of the how you sounded and the name you had and where you were fitting in. And resilience is the breeding ground for innovation, right? A lot of the most well-known innovations that we have came about through something linked to the military. And the reason being that when we're in a position, and the same applies to companies, that we think, we need to innovate because we need to start doing something different. That might be a motivating factor. Or, the next stage of motivation could be that we need to innovate because we need to help more people. That's a motivator. But as soon as it becomes, we need to innovate and find a way, because if we don't, then thousands of people are going to die, including ourselves. There's no greater motivator in life than that, right? And the need to, like you say, adapt. Of course, that's an extreme example in that. But when you're given a motivator that the other side of not doing something, i.e. not being resilient or not adapting to your environment, is such a huge negative, then there's no better motivator to do so. And I think, building that experience at an early age is something that, whether you realize it at the time or not, does have a knock-on effect to how you then approach, the fact that you were then able to work in some of the positions that you did, or then go on to create your own company.
I think that's absolutely true. And it's in a way, out of necessity, comes innovation. And the military point, I think the mobile phone, the GPS, all these things came from there, absolutely.
Exactly.
And so my talking again about personal background, my stepfather is an engineer, so he's been working on helicopters and things, some of which also went to the military forces, and that's one of his key points.
Really?
Says that it's kind of counterintuitive that things that you build for a completely different purpose at some point go mainstream in society and become part of our daily lives. So again, the unexpected in a way.
The highways, the microwave ovens, thing that now have become such daily items. The origins of them were actually, we needed this for a purpose that came from defending your country. So you mentioned that your parents split up at quite a young age, and aside from the common talked points of the role of divorce, but then also in the splitting of the two different types of figures in your life, and given that they're from different cultures and backgrounds, having them separate at a young age, did that have its own effect on your own life as a child, or the way you perceived certain things, or viewed your outlook?
So it did, in the sense that, back to the identity thing, when people asked about the name, then I had to explain, because my father is from England, but then my father wasn't there. So there was always that reminder, if you will. At the same time, I was fortunate to find a new person in my life, my stepfather. So my mom got remarried a few years afterwards. He's a fantastic figure in my life. He himself has been through a bit of a journey, because he came from a divorce himself. And again, you need to think back in the 80s, Italy, very Catholic environment. All these things were difficult to accept. But again, he rebuilt his life, new family. And again, it was a teaching that nothing is impossible. You can get through things, turn things around. When everything seems lost, actually, you can refine love and family. And he's been an example as well.
In those early years, like you said, being in school and being around people who may have seen you and thought, this is not the name and the face that I would have put to the voice that I was hearing. What was the actual impact that had in terms of the people you found yourself hanging around with? And did you find yourself being blending in the majority, or finding yourself more as an exception that was always kind of looking in from the outside?
So if I think back of my friends and people I grew up with, I've always had a bit of an allergy, if you will, for certain steady / judgmental backgrounds. And now thinking of the Milan kind of heritage, there's certain social class, if you will, like in any country, most probably, which is is a clique, and they kind of only recognize certain type of backgrounds and roots and accept only those. And that has always been a bit of my personal fight, if you will, looking at that. And so I would say my friends and also my passions, when I went into music when I was a kid, as lots of people do, and there's always been a bit of a wanting to get my voice heard, if you will, and that has been I think a common trait in me, and also my surroundings, if you will. And if you think now of the entrepreneurial kind of career, it is about rising above a little bit, and trying to get a new thing noticed and heard and appreciated in a very important space, by the way. And I think that same characteristic is kind of a leitmotif, if you will.
So you went on to study sustainable business. When did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
There was I think 2007 or 8, I read this book called Hot, Flat and Crowded by Thomas Friedman. He's a New York columnist. He was famous at the time for a book called The World is Flat, which is all about globalization. And then the sequel, if you will, a couple of years afterwards, was actually globalization is bringing climate change, overpopulation, etc., etc. And the way he depicted and described the challenge and how the climate issue was really interlinked with the socio-political issue. Because if you think about it, a lot of the transition we need to do is away from fossil fuels. We were and we are acquiring fossil fuels by funding people that don't particularly like us most of the times. So that, in a way, I was putting these two things together and I was like, actually, there are two challenges to solve here. And if we get it right, it's going to be good for everyone. So that was the pivotal moment, I think. And I had the chance actually to meet him at the Copenhagen thing that I was mentioning before, which was amazing to me. It's like my Taylor Swift moment, if you will, before Taylor Swift. So that was the key moment.
The reason I asked that is I had a guest on called Dattani, and he went down a similar route of caring about the environment, and he created his own business around finding opportunities for people from various backgrounds who are interested in this space. And for him, he had a very particular interest at a young age, where during community service he was just very interested in wildlife, and he saw, even from when he was a little child, he used to always be in the garden. And for him, that was it was something that was an interest that you have as a child. And then you grow up, and obviously you tend to park or hide your childish interest, because that's exactly how you see it. You bury that inner child. But then when he was on community service, he was exposed again to having to clean up the environment, and he refound this passion for it. And this idea of serendipity. So have you seen the film Slumdog Millionaire?
Yes, but my memory now is like escaping the story. Remember?
Yeah,
I remember it.
Right. Yeah.
Great soundtrack, by the way.
Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Great soundtrack. Quick promo for the Slumdog Millionaire soundtrack. But the thing that is really amazing about that film is, for anyone who doesn't know it, there's a child, and he kind of goes along life in, some would see it quite an unfortunate circumstances in terms of, he overall a happy child, but he doesn't have anything of significance in terms of outlook or opportunity that we would consider now as prosperous. But he gets this moment of fortune where he ends up on the Indian version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And in that, he has 12 questions, completely random, that are given to him. And if he answers them right, as everyone understands the format, he then wins the 1 million or the equivalent there. The story is amazing because it goes through each question that are moments in his life that are completely random, or so it seems, and all of them have some link to the question that he then gets asked. And what I love about that as a concept is each question set the context for, like I say, what seemed to be completely unrelated moments throughout his very short life, but from the moments from before, where to him he might have seen them as seemingly irrelevant at the time, but as you can see in this case, they all came together in a sense of all those 12 moments early in his life had to happen for him to then win the big prize, right? And I love that as a context for setting the idea of, it's very often that we look at the things that we do, and either we know we have to do it, but don't know why we're doing it, or we don't think it has any significance in the moment that it's done to where it's then got us to today. Can you see in those, kind of formative years, so the points in either during your studies or in the times when you were at school, either with the interactions that you had with family or friends, that might have really take you down the route of making a switch from what would be considered a very successful, career route to something where, like you've said, is pushing yourself into a challenge and something where you are talking about a space that, and we'll get into that, definitely is a challenge to get people on your side of actually taking action in.
I'm trying to think back at any episode. One thing that I know for sure is that, and this is true for what I'm doing now, but any big change that people want to do in life, or especially if they want to get into entrepreneurship, you have to feel. You have to feel that this is the thing that you want to do. You have to feel that it's not a problem to sacrifice your weekends, or rather than watching the match, you're gonna do some work, or you have to feel that it will not feel like work. It will be tiring, but it will be energizing at the same time. And I think that's a key difference to me versus call it corporate work, if you will. It is work, but it doesn't feel like work when you are launching your own venture in a space that you feel is right. At the same time, you feel where something is not right for you, I think. So an episode that I remember well was, say, just over 10 years ago. I was still in Milan. I had the chance to launch another business. Then there was this other serial entrepreneur from Milan who came to me and said, I would like to launch something in this space. I'll fund it. You run it. I'll kind of help you on the financial side, if you will. And then we'll grow it, etc., etc. I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. But I knew I wanted to come here and live here for a while. And I wanted to also be in a place which is a global stage. And I remember, so I was 29, 30, and I remember waking up a Sunday morning and thinking, if I fast forward the tape, and I'm now 40, I'm 43, by the way, at the moment, but say I'm 40, and I am, I've made it. This business is successful, and I'm at my villa near Lake Como, whatever. But I didn't go to London and have this part of the experience in my life that I was looking to have. I wouldn't feel good. So there was no much debate at that point. You can overthink it, and you're like, this is amazing, it's a great opportunity, it's a great business partner, it's financially, actually it would work out because he would pay for the salary to begin with. But I was like, it doesn't feel right. And I think in general, and I don't know where it comes from, to be honest, but there are things, and this is like a leitmotif in other parts of my journey, where I had the gut feeling that something was right or wrong, and then you just follow it. I think you just follow it.
Yeah, I love that. And, something you were saying earlier about going down this path of entrepreneurship and just knowing and, having to wake up on the weekend and sacrifice that time. There's the coach of the Chinese weightlifting team, he was once asked a question of, what is it that, makes these guys special? What is it that makes them, the athletes? And, you could be expecting to hear an answer of this training routine, or, they were born with, higher muscle density, whatever it may be. But the one thing that he replied was that the thing that makes these athletes better than the other ones is that they are willing to get up every day and knowing that they're going to have to do the boring things. And I think we also get into this space where, I know, like you said, it should never feel like work. And I think if you're pursuing something that you are really passionate about, it won't feel like work. But I don't think that takes away from the fact that somewhere in that, you're going to have to be doing things that aren't fun. Yeah. Because they need to be done. And in that kind of an example of an athlete, to make the really great athlete, sometimes they have to do that, maybe 1 hour row at a slow pace, because it's not all about maxing yourself out. It's about building up that, aerobic resilience, and that takes time and patience, and it can be really boring to go on that slow run. And the same, when it comes to business, there's a certain level of admin. Sure, you can outsource it and you have a team, but there will be something that you have to do yourself that isn't the fun stuff. And, I think even in what you're saying, it's when you get to a point where, what I think it is when you see that there's a meaning either for yourself or for others, that you learn to accept that you are even willing to do these boring things, because that, I guess, that internal calling
Yeah.
or that voice that you hear from somewhere that's calling at you saying that if you don't do this, there will be a point that you'll get to where you'll regret
Exactly.
not having done it.
Yeah. And it's better to fail than to regret, in my view. There's a higher risk, if you will, of regretting stuff than in failing at stuff. So, and that has been my way of looking at things.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's something that I've come to learn to accept as well, which is, or let me ask you, for you, what is your main purpose or goal for yourself?
I'd like to leave behind something that is better than what I found.
Yeah.
So everyone can take this and kind of make it their own in a way. It doesn't have to be one specific thing like I want to help people do this, or I want to save the planet from this. It can be also financial for some people. I come from this place and I want to leave behind this much bigger legacy for my next generation, which is an amazing goal as well. But yeah, to me, it's been always that making sure that at the end of the journey, I look back and I'm like, yeah, personally, at least I did everything I could to leave this place in a better state than how I found it.
Yeah, I love that response. And, the reason that I wanted to ask that is because, like I said, I think there's something that I've come to learn or better understand about people, which is, this is a question where the common answer is, I want to be happy, or I want my family to be happy, and I want to help do that. And there's nothing at all wrong with that. But I think there's people who want to get their immediate source of happiness now, so in every moment. And there's an example given of two philosophers, and I cannot remember, but one gives the example of I am happy if in each individual moment now I am content in like loving and enjoying what I do. And he's like, if I'm out in the Caribbean and I'm sipping my cocktail while on a float thing in a pool, then I'm happy. And if I'm doing that infinitely until the end of my life, then I've lived a happy life, right?
That's a lot of cocktails.
Yeah, exactly. And the opposing or the other argument is that a successful or happy life lived, or a purposeful life lived, is someone where when they get to the end of their life, they look back and they've done something that they've wanted to do. So they're kind of two contrasting ones, where one is, taking the approach of, a life of immediate happiness that you are aiming to fulfill at every moment all the way through. In that case, you're not going to be willing to do the boring stuff, because then you're not having fun in that moment. But, when you for you to know that your version of purpose, or what your meaning to your life is, getting to the end of your life, looking back and having left, like you said, something different. In order to do that, that means now you need to, put in, to take for that challenge. And, the best phrasing I've ever heard of it is, me doing something now that might suck, but knowing that it is a hard graft that I'm putting in, that I can then look back on and feel I'm happy now because I put the graft in to earn this. It pays longer dividends forward in terms of self-happiness than if I just did something for immediate pleasure now, because that just won't last. It's not to tell people not to enjoy themselves, but I think, when you start to look inside to think, do you live a life that you feel has meaning, or that you want to have meaning? These are some of the things that you have to go through in order to fulfill that.
Yeah, probably. Maybe the truth is in the balance of these two philosophers. You need to enjoy the moment, carpe diem, and you need to also probably have a bit of a trajectory, if you will.
Yeah.
There's a lot of so this applies to every environment, I think. It does. So saying that you want to improve the state of what you found, I think it can be, you're running a shop, you're in a corporate, and you want to make that place better, because then you got your 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 colleagues having a better life, or enjoying more what they do every day. So I think you can apply that to the micro as much as to the macro. because I've spent a lot of time in corporate before, that was the same thinking applied to a different environment.
Yeah.
And I think seeing lots of people today, especially after the pandemic, recalibrating, reconsidering what's purpose for them. I've seen a rush, and I've been one of those, sounds a bit of a joke, but a rush of, I want to do my own thing and go more to a pure purpose space. But there's lots of purpose also in companies, corporates, organizations, as long as you find your contribution.
Yeah, it's interesting because, for something like this, it's a change that it requires sort of like effective management. And by management, I mean effective risk management, effective ESG management, effective actual leadership management. It's not something that can sit with the leaders at the top to influence a change when you're talking about something like climate change. And I heard this somewhere, looking at the example of COVID, one of the things that made the impact of it so severe was that along with all the sort of economical and technical advancement that we've had, say, over the last century, we've almost got into a position as a society where we see something like a pandemic as, oh, those are the things that used to happen in the old days, right? And I think there's this idea of there's this idea of becoming complacent when we are convinced that a risk of the past has been defeated, i.e., we now have the resources to be able to deal with, or the medicine, we have the medicine, we have the hospitals and etc. to deal with diseases, so a pandemic can't happen, right? And that's something where, there was skepticism and warnings about, an upcoming pandemic from years before that were largely ignored because as a society, we'd said that this was a thing of the past, that we've overcome that kind of risk. And then, that obviously wasn't the case. When looking at climate change, the way I see it in terms of it being similar is there's some kind of level of complacency as a society, but not because we think it's something that's been defeated. What is your view of, firstly, do you think there's complacency, and, why do you think we are like that in general, that it has become such a pressing issue that, as every day goes by, it becomes more and more of a challenge?
So firstly, and unfortunately, I would say, it's become more of an issue because parts of the world are now experiencing the consequences of it. So I had recently a lady from Pakistan posting something on our LinkedIn saying, for us, this is already the reality. We're seeing more extreme weather, floodings, etc., etc. So it's not a fantasy for the future, unfortunately. So I think there are lots of parts in the world which are affected already. So that makes it more prominent. To your question about complacency, the paradox, if you will, is that the most affected parts of the world are the ones that have got less leverage and less responsibility, if you will, or grip into making the necessary change, because it's the global south and the north and the global north, if you will, with most of these extreme weather conditions being in the global south, but most of carbon emissions coming from the global north. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect there as well. And then to your point, change is hard, first of all. So if you let's tackle it from an organizational point of view. There's someone in charge of sustainability, I think, or climate or carbon reporting or risk management is their job. In reality, everyone in the organization, those who buy the new production machines, those who decide which company cars you need to have, those who decide the travel policies, those who decide which paper to buy, which products to launch, what type of advertising to do, every micro decision makes or break the big strategy. In this case, the climate strategy. And then if you enlarge this at societal level, it's all of us. Small changes, ditching the drive, or seem petty things, but they all add up. But because they're small in our daily life, we tend to think, well, it's someone else's issue. Someone else will solve it. The big guys with the big deep pockets, And maybe technology, by the way, which is like this. There's an hallucination, I think, which we'll get some magical technology which sucks out carbon of the atmosphere and sends it to Mars. We'll do something similar maybe, but it will take another 40 years. And in the meantime, we need to do something now. So I think there is this, change is difficult. The change you can enact looks small to you. We are creatures of habit. We think someone else will solve it. And hence we fall into complacency.
And so your business, 51 to carbon zero, what made you specifically start that?
So it was the realization that for companies, just getting a grasp of the data that you need to understand your footprint was already a challenge. And I thought for people to spend their times counting numbers rather than activating action is a waste of time, energy, passion, etc., etc. So you see lots of people in companies really passionate about this topic, but then it becomes a compliance thing. You have to collect numbers and tick a few boxes and issue a report, and that's it. So I thought, okay, let's minimize as much as possible of that, all of that with technology, and then let's build a platform where people can actually unlock their passion, because that will then drive action, that will drive change, and there will be a positive snowball effect. And that's the whole concept between 51 to carbon zero. It's all about carbon reduction rather than carbon accounting. And the name itself, which all of my friends, ex-colleagues in marketing say, it's too long, no one will remember it. It's numbers and letters, but there's an important message.
Yeah.
It's about the 51 billion tons of greenhouse gas, 51 billion tons that we push in the atmosphere every year. And they need to get down to zero or net zero in technical terms as quick as possible. So everything we do, every conversation we have with a client, every internal conversation on a new feature is all about reducing carbon rather than carbon accounting or offsets, which is another chapter that we can talk about. It goes back to your complacency. Someone else will solve it.
Yeah. It's a big point. And, I look at something like this where, looking at some of the people that I've seen who've decided to really push forward with something that they strongly believe that they can have an impact on. And, now hearing more of your story to understand, firstly, what in you allows you to be able to do this, that you're willing to take on challenges and sacrifice those evenings and those weekends, but also because you strongly believe that this is your way of making that purpose or leaving the world in a better place than before. Also looking at the time in the time of your life in which you did it. If I think of some of the risks that people take, one of the things that I hear come up a lot is that they say they took the risk that they were able to at a time where the other side of not taking it was low, in terms of they didn't have commitments either in terms of family or a certain age or children, where they now knew that the downside of taking this risk and it not working out was too large for them to do it. So they did it when they were single or when they had enough money but no one to have expectation on them. The point at life at which it happened for you, it seems that there's a higher level of risk involved. What was that conversation that you had with yourself, or can you remember what was that turning point where you thought that internal dialogue of you having to pursue this was stronger than the pushback that may have been of the downside, the risks of this not working out?
Great question, because this has been, so I had an internal debate for 5 months whether I should do this or not. My wife from day one said, if you don't do this, you'll be a fool.
Wow.
So completely, well, I was like, well, everything that you've just said, commitments, etc. We got kids. So it's all about perception. It's how you interpret things in your brain, if you will. So she was super convinced. She said, this is a great idea. This is something you wanted to do. It's going to work. You'll make it work. No doubts. So, well, to hear this, so amazing. Secondly, I had a good career. I thought, what is the risk here? Really, what is the risk? That I go off and do this for 2-3 years and it doesn't work? I go back into my corporate career, is my CV, my experience, my persona, my confidence gonna be bigger if I do this for 3 years and learn all the, go through the grit and have etc., and maybe it doesn't work, or if I stay in my corporate career. And when I look at that way, I was like, well, there's no comparison. I'll learn much more if I do this. And then, worst case scenario, I go back with a much broader toolkit. So at that point, the risk element completely went out. And then I remember my co-founder, last like element that came in, the convincing conversation was the difference between being good and being great is courage.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, so think about it. Do you want to be good or you want to be great? And I said, you bastard, you know how to convince me. Let's do it.
I love that. I love that a lot. And there's also another one, which is to be exceptional, you have to learn to be the exception, because that's what defines being exceptional. And that also means that in order to achieve exceptional results or to do something exceptional, you can't do the normal things that normal people are doing and expect the results not to be normal, right? And that's something that I've definitely learned from people that have come on, and like yourself, where it's the acceptance that this is the only way I'm going to do something to be great, because that's what I want to. And again, not for yourself, but for making that impact. Something else that I find that really fascinates me about what you're trying to do is we live in, I would say, a world now where it's driven by fast consumption and minimal effort or commitment to attain it, right? So we have technology, everything is available on one fingertip on an app. We don't need to get into the car and drive down to a restaurant and order a meal anymore. We can just click on Uber Eats. We don't need to write a letter and post it and wait a few days for someone to get it. We can now send an email. All the way through to even dating. We don't need to go through the uncomfortable situation or realization that we need to go and have an awkward conversation with someone in public, because we can just swipe right. Being that this is the way that the world has unfolded, nowadays I see how that also applies to philanthropy. And, I can be guilty of the same. It's become a lot easier, or so easy, to donate a bit of money there, or sign up to a petition over here, or do an ice bucket challenge, and it's coming all from a good place. It's all from a place of, I want to make as much of an impact as I can across as many different areas of something like philanthropy, without actually having to put too much time and effort or energy into doing so, because then I can do it in more areas. But then the problem with that is it's become harder for people to commit to a certain cause. And again, that applies to everything, right? Even in if you talk about dating and relationships, because people have an abundance of option and they don't want to miss out, because we also live in a generation of FOMO, people are going to be giving less of a chance to opportunities. Millennials now, they don't want to stay in jobs for as long as the previous generation would, because there are so many more opportunities that we don't want to miss out on. Again, I see how that also applies in the space of making a difference in charitable work. So when it comes to something like climate change and sustainability, I can see how that might just be one of a number of different philanthropic initiatives that I'm willing to put my time, money, or thought into. Given that it's such, and as you've discussed, 51 billion, given that it's such a big change that needs to be made, how do you see this unfolding with, the sort of current and next generation of our society? What's the outlook?
So I think new generations, I see my kids, they talk about climate change at school, which is amazing. It means it will be second nature to them to think about this issue in everything that they do. And they will look at us and say, what have you done at the time when you had the power to do something about it? And that's also something that kind of pushes me every day. As they say, we live in an attention economy. So attention is a precious and scarce resource, and it is true. We swipe left or right. There must be a Tinder for charities, I'm sure, where you donate to causes, and they just come on the screen and you swipe one way or the other. I see this. I see climate as not really as a philanthropic thing. A philanthropic thing is something you do in exchange of nothing really. Apart from your personal fulfillment at the moment, and it's an important thing to do, of course. Charitable work, charitable donations or charitable work, and charitable work is not for everyone, and I don't think people should force themselves into it. Charitable donations are a perfectly valid alternative if they can, of course. Climate change, I see it slightly differently or profoundly differently. It's about preserving our home. So take it more as you're renovating your house, and you have to because you need running water, and you need the toilet, and you need the roof, and you need all the stuff. So the sense of urgency and the payback, if you will, is completely different. And even when I speak with clients, I separate all the corporate social responsibility and philanthropic work from this. Also, philanthropic work doesn't require you to change your own business operations. Climate change does. You have to source things, transport things, deploy and distribute things, recycle things in a different way. So it's a more profound change with a more profound payback, if you can talk about payback.
How I like to end these conversations is, especially by understanding the context of who you are and really what it means to you to have done what you've decided to do, and in this case in climate change, so much so that back to your conversation around with your wife and what your friend was saying, that you were willing to take that risk at not the most easiest time of your life to be able to do it, given the downsides of it not working out. Something like this, what will really allow it to be, when you're chasing initiative that is bigger than yourself, for it to continue beyond your time, it requires instilling a set of shared values or common beliefs that the next generation of people working on this will believe in, for it to pay off in the long term. What are these common goals and shared values that they will have that will allow this to be successful?
So you need to believe that what you're doing is absolutely worth every single second that you spend on it. Because there will be not just bumps, there will be walls on the way, and you'll be discouraged. You'll receive lots of no's from people around you in your network, maybe family, clients and prospects and investors and whoever. And you just have to keep going and be convinced again that nothing is impossible. It just takes a bit longer.
That's amazing. It's one of my favorite lessons that I've learned is the world is there for the optimists taking. And that's, this idea that if you want to achieve anything big, then you have to believe it can happen. Otherwise, it never will. Because, it's easy for the cynicists to see themselves as smarter than someone who's an optimist, because it's you believe that, that's so cute that you think that's possible, and in kind of any scenario. And it could even be the case that 9 out of 10 times they are right, that they were right to be cynical. But the one time out of 10 or the one time out of 100 that the optimist is right, that I can make this difference or this can happen, that's the one that counts.
Exactly. And it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things if you fail or you achieve. Because as long as there's enough of us doing this, someone will get there.
Yeah.
I prefer to think that I'm one of those. But yeah, if you think about it, it's really a matter of, it's a numbers game as well. If lots of people are marching towards a mission, someone will get there. Absolutely, someone will get there. And also the other thing is there will be gremlins kind of popping up in your mind, and that's normal. I mean, it's easy now for me to come here and give my sermon on what's right and what's wrong and how to do this. But I get these things as well. You gotta actually maybe you should have listened to that person, or maybe actually is this gonna work out? It's normal. So you have to embrace also those unsettling moments where you go to bed and you're like, really can't go to sleep now. This happened today. It's gonna work, and then you just get over it, and thoughts are a bit like a friend of mine told me thoughts are like a train. You can decide to catch the train, jump on the train, or just let the train go and get on the next thought. And that's whenever I got these shadows coming in, I think, okay, I'll let this train go and I'll get on the next thought.
Yeah, I like this. It's also, I think I heard Stephen Bartlett say once that, especially with how busy someone like him with his schedule is, when thoughts come in his mind, especially if it's one that he may want to pay attention to, because some of them deserve some time, but you might not have the time there to go into it, good or bad. He's like, in my mind, I park it on the bookshelf, and it's something that I'll revisit later. So I think I like your version, because if it's a bad thought, just let that train go.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are even either good thoughts or constructively bad thoughts that you do need to think of. But maybe it's like, okay, I'm very in the zone now. Let me just focus on this. Something that you can put on the bookshelf and be like, okay, I will come back to that, and I haven't just ignored it. I think you are one of the people who will be in that, 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100 of optimists who are making things happen and will do. And, not just saying that because here you are as a guest on the show, but, getting to understand the way you think and the kind of early experiences that have molded why you think like this. It's not something that you will accept just giving up. And that's why, again, going back to the point of being willing to do the boring stuff, because your idea of, a meaningful, happy life is having made that difference. It's something like this is in the right person's hands, and hopefully there's more of you doing the same thing.
You.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a bonus question that I ask all guests. If you could write one message on a piece of paper that they would read after you were gone, and it's something that they would then live by, what would you write?
Never say never.
Yeah.
You can always turn things around. You can always follow your dream. You can always find the right person, or the right context. It's just a matter of putting the time and the energy to find that thing that you're looking for.